be with you like a forever chemical. I wanna be with you like a forever chemical.
Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Craig Butt. I am a staff application scientist at SCIEX, and welcome to another episode of Dr. Craig's PFAS Fireside Chats. One of the main uses of PFAS is in AFFF, or aqueous film forming foams. These are the products you know that are used to combat petroleum-based fires and have high uses around airports and military bases. As a consequence of their use, hundreds of drinking water supplies in the United States and certainly around the world have become contaminated with PFAS. But these AFFF mixtures are very complex, and their exact composition is often hidden under the cloak of confidential business information. Understanding their composition is a very difficult task and was the focus of a recent paper by my next guest and his colleagues. Bridger Ruyle is a Ph.D. student at Harvard University in the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, and he's here today to talk to us about his work in elucidating the composition of AFFF mixtures. Bridger, welcome to the show.
Hi, Dr. Craig. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So there's a lot in your paper, and we're going to get into the methods later on. But to begin with, I really want to hit with what I felt was the main finding, and that is explain to us how well were analytical chemists doing with regards to identifying what was in these AFFF mixtures?
Well, we assessed how well we were able to measure PFAS and AFFF in a couple different ways. One being the standard kind of workhorse method that looked at PFAS on EPA 533 list using targeted LCMS. And then we also used combustion ion chromatography to measure extractable organofluorine. And what we found is that in the contemporary AFFFs that are on the market, that are approved by the military to be used right now, that the EPA method only captures less than 1% of the total PFAS that are present in these AFFFs. And even if you look at the legacy products that were manufactured by 3M and haven't been used for 2 decades, we're still only able to quantify around 50% of the PFAS in that product.
Wow, amazing. So using this ion method to look at the total PFAS burden, if you will, in the mixtures, less than 1%, that's not good. That's not a passing grade at Harvard or certainly anywhere else. So why do you think, I just want to touch on something you said about with the legacy mixture. You did a little bit better with the legacy mixture. Why do you think you were able to account for more of the organic fluorine composition?
So the primary compound that we identified in the legacy mixture was PFAS, and that's kind of the chemical that we all think about when we think about AFFF, and that alone made up 33% of the PFAS in that product. But we also identified PFHXS, other carboxylates and sulfonates, but what we ended up finding was that about 50% of the PFAS in that foam were polyfluoroalkyl precursors, primarily that had 6 carbons, so they would have the potential in the environment to transform into PFHXS.
But yeah, so the legacy mixture, you did, pretty good job of understanding its composition based on these targeted methods. But I assume that those are no longer in use, right? I mean, 3M had stopped that chemistry a while ago. Is that correct?
That's right. So those AFFFs haven't been approved for use for 2 decades, although there are reports that the military kind of used their remaining reserves through the 2000s. Those compounds we still find in high levels in the environment and are still like in groundwater, which can take decades for the PFAS to move from the source to sites of exposure. So although that those specific products aren't being used anymore, exposures are still occurring because of that use decades ago.
Right. The focus of your paper really was on these new mixtures that are currently in use.
That's right.
Yeah, and so what about those? What did you find? What was in them?
So what we found was that of the targeted PFAS that we could identify, the primary compound was 6,2-fluorotelomere sulfonate. And what was kind of that missing fraction we identified was primarily compounds that could degrade into 6,2-fluorotelomere sulfonate, but they included PFAS that had cationic moieties or zwitterionic moieties, so really diverse set of PFAS that we identified.
Yeah, but it sounded like they all had that same 6,2 fluorotelomere backbone, and then a modification of the head group. Is that correct?
That's right. And we were able to determine those structures through two independent techniques. One of them being what people are familiar with, the total oxidizable precursor assay, which we developed a new way of interpreting that data that showed that about 90% of PFAS in the new AFFFs were 6,2 fluorotelomere compounds. And then we also used non-targeted analysis, where we limited the compounds by a abundance of 500,000 to identify the major PFAS in these products. And we identified 14 PFAS, all of the 6,2 fluorotelomere structures. And so both of those approaches kind of yielded the same result, that 90% of PFAS in these products are these types of compounds.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So although you were not able to identify the bulk of the composition via the targeted method, your untargeted approach did really yield quite rich results.
That's right. And through the untargeted approach, we were able to kind of explore some of the history of these chemicals as well. And what we found was a lot of these chemistries were patented in the 70s or 80s for AFFF use. So although they are contemporary and the replacement compounds that are in use now, they have been they've been on the industry radar for decades, and it has taken the environmental scientists like us 2 decades or more to be able to even detect them.
Wow. So yeah, certainly maybe new to environmental chemists and new to yourself, but certainly not new to the fluorochemical industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And these mixtures, are they still available for purchase today, or do you have a sense on whether industry has then moved on to something else?
So these are the currently approved mil-spec AFFFs. So what would be purchased by the military or anybody who follows that standard today. I know that there are, last year, in the new military budget, there was a provision that phases out PFAS in AFFF by, I believe, either 2023 or 2024. So these foams will be used presumably until they identify non-PFAS based AFFFs that meet that standard.
Right. Okay. Sounds like you've got some more work to do in the next couple of years. So really cool work, Bridger, focusing in on these AFFF mixtures. But do you have a sense on what it actually looks like in the environment? Because as we started off the conversation, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of drinking water supplies that have been contaminated through the AFFF use. Again, do you know what's going on out there in the natural environment?
We are getting a sense of that. I led a follow-up study looking at the fingerprint of AFFF use in downstream surface water on Cape Cod, comparing the signal in different areas on Cape Cod that have AFFF contamination and that don't have AFFF contamination. And what we see is the same compounds that are high in the AFFF are also high in the downstream environment. And that paper will be out really soon in the next couple of weeks. So can look forward to seeing that.
Great. Well, I don't think we'll have time to get into that today, but hopefully we can get you back on the show once it has been published and you can explain the results from that.
Great. I'd be happy to.
Great. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Really liked the study. Really enjoyed the fact that you took a good detective approach to this, to understanding the composition. And, things that I thought were really important was the fact that targeted methods, such as those on the regulated EPA methods, do not do a good job, do a very poor job of explaining what's in the AFFF mixture, and then your non-target approaches to understanding what the composition was, and the fact that those are potential precursors to the more resistant PFAS that are on those monitoring lists. So yeah, great work. Congratulations to you and your colleagues, and thanks again, Bridger, for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
I want to be with you like a forever chemical.